unlike Hollywood, one thing that makes Indian cinema so distinctive is some of our biggest films are actually family dramas and love stories. And, Dangal story-wise is not a massive movie, but it is a massive movie because of the star value and the fact that it is a heartfelt story. Those are our versions of big films. In Hollywood, it's Mission Impossible. Here, it could be a Shah Rukh Khan love story. And, that is a big film. So...
Hi, Suchin. Welcome to Odanta. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Great. Actually, so it's been, what, 13 years since the last two films? I wanted to ask you, how do you think in the last 13 years has your writing, and especially the platforms that you used to write, evolved a little bit? Do you see any change?
Do I see any change in my writing?
Yeah, in the last 10, 12 years, where do you think, and how have you evolved with the way you write and with the platforms that you use?
So it's a very, very good question. It's a very loaded question. In terms of my writing, I have a very simple approach to it. Every 5 to 6 months, I read something that I wrote 5 to 6 months ago, and I think that's terrible. And I do this every 5 to 6 months, and I'm guessing this is going to continue till they stop making Avatar movies. So I guess the positive way of looking at that is ideally you get better at what you do. You feel more proud, you write more clearly, you write more honestly. The things you have to say and how you say them ideally get better over time. So I'm definitely less terrible as a writer than I was, and I guess I'll take that as a win. And yeah, I mean, everything, you're constantly changing, right? So it's how you're seeing films and how you're processing them and then expressing that is always changing. A best example I can give you is if you think of your favorite movies as a kid or that you've seen years ago, if you revisit these movies over time, the movie's still the same. Your experience of them will change over time. If you watch your favorite movie every 5 years, because you're changing as a person, you relate to some things more, relate to other things less. So we are always changing. And so I guess as a result of that, writing about movies will always change. And ideally, the graph keeps going up, or else pick another career, I guess.
I just want to know, first thing off your head, what did you think was something that set this film apart from the last one?
So this film, interestingly, sequels tend to go bigger, right? It's about sort of the second part always goes bigger. This one, interestingly, is actually a smaller story if you look at it, but it tries to go deeper. It tries to become more of a intimate family drama and sort of an examination of parenthood. It really is a family story. So I think that's what really sets this one apart. Yes, there's the wonderful world building, but more than have us in awe of sort of Pandora and this fantastical world, which it obviously does do, and be a visual spectacle. It really tries to take things deeper and really make us feel these characters much more than the last one.
Very few times in recent history, especially with all this streaming and everything, that directors get free reign to completely bring their vision to the screen. And maybe Nope, maybe The Batman. These are very few examples I can think of where all of this comes together. So I just want to know what your thoughts are on why and when this happens.
So it's a very loaded question. I read a book about this a couple of years ago, and basically in the current state of Hollywood, there are maximum 2 to 3 directors who can get an entire film, a massive blockbuster film, greenlit, based entirely on just their track record, storytelling ability, and just their, I guess, their reputation. The 2 big names are Christopher Nolan and James Cameron, and Steven Spielberg to some degree, but even he isn't exactly sort of making the big blockbusters right now. So more than, I mean, Nope is an interesting example because it's still a small film, but yes, Jordan Peele is definitely in that category. The current state of Hollywood it's all about existing IP. So even if you take a Batman, even though it's somebody really given the free reign to do something very different to that character, which is fantastic. It's still, you can only make a film that big if it's the Batman. It has to be existing comic books, cartoons. What are you adapting, remaking, rebooting, sequels? That's the world. It's a franchise world. That's what makes Avatar and everything Chris Nolan does so distinctive. These are visionary storytellers who tell stories on a massive scale that get a massive audience. And there's nothing original that does that anymore. And that's, I think, that's one of the reasons I love Avatar, because the first one is one of my favorite blockbusters, but it really is about there is no one else telling original stories, something that's refreshing. We're all even as a superhero fan, so many of us are tired of Marvel movies, because it's just fatigue that sets in.
Yeah.
These are genuinely true blue, original storytelling, original films that is pure artistry. You're not trying to play with something existing. And James Cameron really has massive vision. He really is an artist, and also he tells very big, accessible stories. And I think that's what really makes him so distinctive. And the fact that he really knows, he can really pull his weight and demand anything of a studio, and he will deliver based on his track record. He will make the well-crafted blockbuster that people will love, and it doesn't have somebody in spandex as the star. And I think that tells you everything. And he's one of the only ones in today's world that can do that.
Right. I agree. And I think films like these are probably another reason why a lot of us flock to the cinemas as well, no matter what you say. And at the same day, they're yet original stories, so no one can really complain about the fact that they aren't. But see, like I know you are a big proponent of streaming, especially in Hindi films, the content that's come out. And I mean, congratulations on the roundtable. That was really, really fun to watch you.
Thank you so much.
Speak to all these guys. But going into 2023, right? Knowing that films like Lal Singh Chadda, Anek, actually good films that were resurrected on streaming. Where do you stand now on the theater versus streaming debate?
So there are two parts to this question. It's a storytelling question, and it's a distribution question, like an industry question. On the storytelling side of it, I mean, they clearly, whether we like it or not, the industry and the audience seems to have made a clear delineation about within films they're willing to watch in theaters. Give me a Brahmastra event film. I mean, other aspects like Gangubai and these other films really have demanded a massive audience, or a Rohit Shetty film. These are films that people seem to be willing to go to an audience, a cinema for. And then there are the smaller sort of family dramas, things like that, which have been relegated to streaming, which I think is kind of sad, because unlike Hollywood, one thing that makes Indian cinema so distinctive is some of our biggest films are actually family dramas and love stories. And, Dangal, story-wise, is not a massive movie, but it is a massive movie because of the star value and the fact that it is a heartfelt story. Those are our versions of big films. In Hollywood, it's Mission Impossible. Here, it could be a Shah Rukh Khan love story, and that is a big film. So it is kind of sad. For me, I think the only way to watch any film, for me personally, is on the big screen. It's the only thing that truly has my attention. It's the right way to watch any film of any size. But clearly, it's it is a personal choice. On the industry side of it, it's slightly tricky because the film industry is not doing well, in Hollywood and in India. Sort of the overall box office is still well before what it was in 2019. It hasn't recovered, and audiences have changed so much. They have access to streaming now. So it is a tough one, and everyone's scratching their heads as to which films will bring people back into theaters.
Right.
And it is a mixed bag, because a lot of people say it will only be the big tentpole films, which clearly is true, but a lot of those films are also, falling flat, and a lot of interesting smaller films are still working. So it is a very tricky space, but I think the Hindi film industry is sort of well known for taking its audience for granted and getting away with not the greatest storytelling. And now more than ever, I think audiences are really looking for something substantial to pull them into theaters, and I think that's the lesson. And yeah, I mean that's sort of what you hope they will do, or else you will have a lot more KGFs and Pushpas and RRRs where people are getting their big screen experience in other industries elsewhere.
Yeah, and on that note, I wanted to get some recommendations out of you. More importantly, your favorite go to the cinema films of the year, like films that you would definitely ask everyone to watch it in the theaters.
So for me, I think the most cinematic, first of all, ironically, one of my favorite films I watched in theaters this year was Avatar Part 1, which re-released 2 months ago.
Right.
Ironically, I thought it was absolutely phenomenal, and it's aged wonderfully. But in terms of films that released this year, I think the most cinematic blockbuster I've seen all year is KGF Part 2. It absolutely blew me away. It's sort of the gold standard of masala films. What else? In Hollywood, I didn't absolutely love, but I liked a lot of Black Panther Part 2, Wakanda Forever. Everything Everywhere All at Once was another one, which is sort of an indie film, which I thought was very much a theatrical experience, not only because it is such a big, ambitious story in how it's told. It's zany, it's insane, it's weird. Also because it's a very tricky, it's a very interesting, weird, emotional, trippy film. And I think to really appreciate what it's doing and really appreciate the emotion in that film, like you won't always understand it, but still to just feel it, it's meant for the big screen, I think. what else from this year? Something that I go to the cinemas for. There's very little I can think of from Hollywood, unfortunately, apart from obviously Avatar and Avatar Part 2 for sure. The Batman, what a phenomenal way to start the year. So I'll definitely include that. I also recently watched Kantara, which is the other big Kannada hit of the year, which again I think is fantastic, a big screen experience. I think those are the main ones that come to mind.
Great. And on the other end of the spectrum, films that you think flew under the radar, I mean, either ways, on streaming or in the cinemas, that you would really want people to watch.
That is a good one. Flew under the radar. Okay. A couple of things. I'd ironically include Lal Singh Chadda in this category because I think the ratio of the people who have heard about that film versus the people who have actually watched it is actually quite off. And I think within that film, there is something very that category. I don't know if people have seen Badai though from earlier this year, but I think that it's a film that deserves a lot more love, which is now on streaming. Or Everything Everywhere All at Once definitely comes in this category as well. In terms of films that didn't get their due, I'm trying to think. I had another couple in mind. I have a lot of shows that I can name if that comes in. So obviously, a lot of my time goes into covering Indian streaming shows, and I think a lot of those really don't get the attention they deserve. So there was Rocket Boys on Sony Live, which is one of the most ambitious sort of biopics on Indian streaming, and it's done incredibly well. There is Mai on Netflix, which is I think one of the few great Netflix India crime thrillers. Delhi Crime Season 2 really did not disappoint, as a lot of us, were worried it would. And I think the last one I'll give to round this list off is there is a show on Voot called Humble Politician Nagraj. It is by Danish Seth, who's the sort of social media influencer and sort of part Hindi, part English, part Kannada. But it is a complete slapstick, laugh out loud satire on the Indian political world, and it is anything that is comedy so underserved these days. Anything that truly makes you laugh deserves to be celebrated, and it really was truly funny and a very impressive and brave satire on the great Indian political circus.
Yeah, wonderful. I remember watching the first trailer for the Danish State show, and I was like, this is something really different than nothing that I would have expected out of Voot especially. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for the recommendations, and that's all we have for you. And we're so excited to read what you have for us in store for Avatar and Blockbuster Cinema.
No pressure, but no, I'm genuinely enjoying writing about it. I guess for me, at its best, it is slightly sort of uneven sequel, but at its best, this is the movie that really reminded me why I love going to the movies, and I'm very grateful for it.